Thank you to all of my wonderful patrons. What up, nerds? Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. My name is Leslie Smith, and today on the channel, it's time to talk about all of the things I read during the month of November. I had 7 reads. We're going to talk about them. I'm going to tell you what each one was about briefly, what I rated it, and why. Starting with my first read of November, which was The Land of the Living and the Dead by Shauna Lawless. This is book 3 in the Gale Song series. This is era 1. This trilogy is now complete. You can dive right in, get to the end of the first era, and it is going to make you so excited to get your hands on era 2. Is it a cliffhanger? No. You're going to be very satisfied with maybe you'll be satisfied with this ending. There are a few people who didn't like the way it ended. I am one of those that did. For those of you who haven't heard about this Irish historical fantasy series, let me tell you a little bit of what it's about. Where this particular book picks up in the trilogy 1101 AD. Ireland stands on the brink of war. High King Brian faces threats from without and within. His wife, his queen, Gormla, she, unbeknownst to Brian, is an immortal Fomorian, meaning she is able to wield fire magic. Gormla furiously schemes to overthrow her husband and establish Fomorian rule. Meanwhile, Fodla, a descendant who is of another immortal race whose arch nemesis is the Fomorians, she is desperately trying to conceal the identity, the existence of her magically gifted nephew from Tomas, the leader of the descendants, and coincidentally, Fodla's husband. Just as Gormla schemes to take over Ireland and place it under Fomorian rule, Tomas is after the same goal, except that the descendants will rule. This is ultimately what has brought Ireland to the brink of war yet again. And just like I did the first 2 books in this trilogy, I gave The Land of the Living and the Dead 5 stars. I immersion read this one. I had the audiobook that I pre-ordered, plus I was gifted this beautiful hardback from the publisher to read and review for you all. I cannot recommend to you the audiobook enough. It has a whole pack of narrators that really brings the story to life. All of them have that beautiful Irish accent, the Irish lilt, that just makes it so easy to immerse yourself into the story. For those of you who might be new to the channel, how I come up with my star rating is I use the call pile method, which I'll link in the description below how that works. But what call pile is you rate each book based on characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and overall enjoyment. All of these categories, I scored this book 8 and above, and that's how it came to be a 5-star rating. Or to put it more succinctly, I loved everything about this book. My next read in November is a digital ARC that I received from the author. Not exactly to review. He put out a call on his social media a few months back looking for beta readers for a new book that he had written. This book that I picked up was the first book in a series, or it had been a standalone, but Joseph Sell, author I have covered on this channel many times, he was struck with inspiration to turn that standalone into a series. Now, he did not ask any of us to read Save Game, which is the first book in the series Levi's Game. He just offered it and said, hey, I kind of revamped this a little bit. I rewrote some things, added some things so that I could mold it into this series. Here's a copy you can read if you like. Well, I am a completionist. I had to read it. I'm so glad that I did. I absolutely loved this book. Now, I have read the new revised edition. I have not read the previous standalone edition, so I can't speak to that one. What I'm speaking about is the one that is going to be on sale at the end of January 2025. I'll put a pre-order link in the description below. For those of you who are caught up in the craze that is Dungeon Crawler Carl, the game lit RPG series, this is what Save Game falls into, except a more serious version of it. I've seen where it's been compared to Ready Player One. Sort of. There is a game involved, but it's so much better than Ready Player One. That's probably an unpopular opinion. I said what I said, I meant it. So the premise for Save Game is Levi Jensen is our main character. He's 17 years old. He's dropped out of school. His father is facing a devastating illness that he will not survive unless he gets surgery, which costs $350,000. Just like all of us, that is not something Levi and his mother can afford. One thing Levi has going in his life, and I mean it is the one thing, is he is a video game nerd. He's a gaming prodigy, to be more precise about it. And there is this virtual reality game called Fate of Alaria that Levi has entered into. They only accepted 1,000 players, and these were players that needed the money, not wanted the money, not entering the competition because they're good at gaming. They were interviewed. Every single one of these people needed this money for one reason or another, which played into making this a very high stakes book. That's what kept me turning page after page. I just flew through this one. I loved it so much. I found it very relatable as I am a gamer, and there was so much about what Levi felt, what he went through, that I felt. If you've ever been a gamer, even if you don't play now, you read this book, it's going to take you back. It's a whole different type of nostalgia. My rating for Save Game is 5 stars. No surprise for those of you who've been around the channel for a while. When it comes to a Joseph Sell book, I just really click with this author's writing style. I loved that the way that this one was styled is our major chapters were in the VR world of Fate of Alaria, and our little brief interludes were the real life segments of Levi's life. If you know, you know. This one was such a delight. This one scored 9 and up in all 7 of my categories. Here's where things go downhill just a little bit. So in the month of November, I called it quits on House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski, I believe is how his last name is pronounced. House of Leaves is a horror novel, and depending on who you talk to, it's either the greatest horror novel they've ever read or the worst. And there are a lot like me who just couldn't make it through, or they didn't make it through the first time they picked it up. They tried it again later and it worked for them. They had a much more positive experience. I am going to try this one again later, and now that I know what to expect from it, I'll know exactly when I'm able to slide something like this in. If you're looking for something that's going to capture you, something you're going to get lost in, great characters, world building, all that, this is not the one. This is for when you are feeling like, I need to solve a mystery. I want something that's going to be a mind bender. That's what House of Leaves is. So what the premise of this one is, and this was the most interesting thing about it. If this had been the main focus, I would have been flying through this book. I would have never put it down. Will Davidson and his young family move into a new home. He is a photojournalist. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winning photojournalist, but the issue of him traveling a lot has become a bit of strife between him and his wife, so he decides he's going to dial it back. And what he does as his creative outlet is he decides to put all of these cameras throughout the house and document them moving into this home, getting it set up, and settling into a new community. I loved that part of it. That's what I wanted to read about, because this house, after they move in, is bigger on the inside. Not in a cool Doctor Who kind of way, talking about the TARDIS. No, no, no. It's a creepy thing. There would just be this random little added bit of hallway. Strange noises and voices and whispers would emanate from it. At one point, Will Davidson goes into one. He gets a little bit lost. It's very heart-pounding. Now, unfortunately, that is the very smallest part of this book. The vast majority of it is written in a research nonfiction format that this person named Sampano has researched what this movie was called, The Davidson Record, that no one can find a trace of after the fact. Zampano did all of this mountains of research, and he died as an old man in an apartment complex, and this manuscript, all of his notes, was found by another young man who tells his story in the footnotes as he's reading through all of this paperwork that is House of Leaves. I was a little bit intrigued by his story, but then it just got really There was a whole lot of rabbit chasing, and I'm sure that there was a reason for it. I'm sure it was supposed to line up with what was going on with the Davidsons, which probably also tied into what was happening, possibly, allegedly, to Zampano. I got tired of flipping around between the footnotes. I got tired of getting little tiny snippets of the Davidsons moving into this house and then mountains of nonfiction research over my head made no sense. Like, why would you pick out this one word and write me a 12-page research paper on all of the different translations? I just lost interest very quickly and noped out. I was very sad to do that because it was a book that I started reading in October as a patron pick. My friend Steve's Talks book picked that one for me. So I think the next time I attempt this book, I will attempt it with someone else as a buddy read, potentially a small group. I think this one might be better if you take it a chapter at a time and discuss it with other people. I'm gonna need people who are a little smarter than me though, because I'm sure I was missing a lot of stuff. Things turned around after that because the next book that I picked up in November was We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. This is a first in a new series by this author, also titled We Solve Murders, and I had a phenomenal time with it. I've become such a huge cozy mystery thriller fan. I buddy read this one with my friend Kate from the Literary Apothecary, who had an equally wonderful time with this one. Richard Osman did what Richard Osman does best, and that is characters. I put him in second place as writing favorite characters. He's only second to Stephen King. I don't know that anybody will ever write a better set of characters than the quartet from The Dark Tower. I don't believe it's ever going to happen. I won't say never, but honestly, y'all, if you've never read The Dark Tower to experience the quartet, oh my gosh. But Richard Osman is a solid second place for writing characters. And I don't mean just the ones you like, even the ones that you're not supposed to like. They're bad guys. They're written in such a like, you just understand everybody's motivations. You understand why they're doing what they're doing. There's so much humor that's involved. Richard Osman is just a delight to read. We Solve Murders features Steve Wheeler, retired, enjoys his quiet routines, and his daughter-in-law, Amy Wheeler, who thrives on high-stakes security work. But when Amy's latest job, a simple job protecting an author, turns deadly, Amy calls her father-in-law, Steve, for help. And together, these two end up traveling around the globe, evading a killer, and uncovering the truth to a dangerous and deadly mystery. Just absolutely loved it. The author in this one was everything. She stole the scene every time she appeared on the page. Just absolutely adored her. Could not have been more perfect. The other thing that I really loved about this book is how Richard Osman chose to use AI for his benefit. Our villain in this one, who is a money smuggler, uses ChatGPT to rewrite all of his correspondence. He does everything through emails and messages. Everything's written, and he runs it all through ChatGPT to disguise it so that science cannot determine his identity. It's so cute. This one was a solid 4-star read for me. I consumed the audiobook, which I got from my library through my Libby app. The narrator was Nicola Walker, who I did not care for, except for her voice that she gave to Rosie D'Antonio. Y'all, this one was super cute. Cannot recommend enough. Next, I read The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. This was a buddy read with my patron Ev, who was also kind enough to give me this gorgeous copy of this book. Now, if you go into this one expecting something similar to the Winter Night trilogy, don't do that. Please just get rid of those expectations before you go in. This book is very different. In fact, I would say if you read the Winter Night trilogy because you are a fan of fantasy, you're a fan of fairy tales and retellings, but you're not a historical fiction fan, I would say don't even pick this one up. This is very much historical fiction. There is a little thread of what some are calling fantasy. I say it's magical realism. That does not always work for fantasy lovers. I think you would really want to be a historical fiction fan to read this. You also, I believe, need to be in the right frame of mind. If you suffer from PTSD, if you suffer from any type of triggers to do with war, stay away from this one. This author was really too good at describing this war. So let's get into what this one is about. It's January 1918. Former combat nurse Laura Ivan returns to Belgium in order to uncover the truth about her brother Freddie's mysterious death. There are a lot of strange rumors about this person who runs this hotel that soldiers are only ever able to find once, but if they drink with the mysterious person who runs this hotel, they forever spend their lives trying to find him a second time. Laura begins to question if perhaps Freddie did escape death in the trenches to find a darker fate. And the way this one is set up is we get alternating chapters, different points of view between Laura and then her brother Freddie, whose timeline starts with November 1917. After an explosion that results in Freddie being trapped underneath a pillbox, he forms an unlikely alliance with a German soldier, Hans Winter. These two work together in order to retain a sense of sanity. They work together to get out from under that pillbox and escape the battlefield. They're turned around. They don't know which side they need to go to, and end up seeking refuge with a man whose powers seem to erase the horrors of war. The Warm Hands of Ghosts ended up eking out a 3-star read for me. I was able to immersion read this one. I had the audio from my library through my Libby app, and then of course I was reading along here in my hardback. The narrators for this one, for Freddie, we had Michael Crouch, and for Laura, we had January Lavoie, who is one of the best narrators of all time. Now with this one, the reason why it got a 3-star rating, which for those of you who think that's bad, not from Leslie. Leslie says that's a middle of a road. It was okay. I'm glad that I read it. Will I reread it? Probably not. Maybe. We'll have to see. Now that I know its tone, I would try rereading it when I'm in that particular mood for it. I have to be in certain kinds of moods to read books like House of Leaves and The Warm Hands of Ghosts. Now that I know what to expect, I might have a better time with it, so I might reread it. We'll have to put a pin in that. But the reason why it was 3 stars, I only liked about half the plot points. I did not like Laura Ivan at all. I didn't want to be in her point of view at all. I loved Freddie. Freddie was where all of the mystery was. Freddie was where all of the great character moments were. You just run through all of the emotions of what it was like to be trapped on this battlefield. Freddie has no idea if he's going to get out of this pillbox. The terror that he felt, and then to possibly, allegedly escape from the frying pan into the fire. Just the trauma that this character experienced. I loved it, but like I said, Catherine Arden did too good a job describing this war going on around Freddie and Hans Winter. But it just really made an impact on the friendship that these two formed, the bond that formed between just constantly saving each other's lives. And this mysterious hotel owner, that was our magical realism, possible fantasy element in the character of Falande. I thought we were going to get an explanation of who he was. We never did. We actually got nothing, which was a little disappointing. I thought Catherine Arden was really going to spin a tale. There were so many different supernatural things that she included in this novel that were actual rumors that circulated during this great war back in this day and age from the British soldiers. Except for Falande. Falande was the bit of fiction that she added, which I loved, except we never found out who or what he was supposed to be, so it felt a little unfinished to me. My next read for the month of November was Vampiri by Brian Lumley. This is the second book in the vampire horror series Necroscope. I love the audiobooks for this one. I've reread this series many times. I used to have the mass market paperback, have them all on Kindle. This time I decided to try the audiobooks. James Langton is the narrator, and he is just absolutely perfect for this series. Now, this is funny. I have read this book 3 or 4 times now, and it's only on this read that I actually got it. That's because I read Dracula by Bram Stoker for the first time last year. This book is so cool. Brian Lumley loved Dracula. He actually wrote the introduction for the most recent collector's edition that Barnes & Noble had. So I never knew that he didn't create this story. He used the legend of Dracula to show the introduction of vampires into our world. And instead of Dracula, he was called Fëther Ferenczi. And in this novel, our necroscope, Harry Keogh, who thought he finished his battle with the vampires in book 1, discovers there is another one. And it was a very interesting way in how this vampire came to be. And in order to find out how to fight and kill and defeat a vampire, Harry's got to get creative and talk to Tipper Ferenczi and later Fëther Ferenczi, and he has to get them to just tell him their history in hopes they're going to slip up and tell him how to defeat them, because you can't just ask a vampire. They're not going to tell you that. They're tricksy little things. There was so many interesting things discovered, and while Lumley borrows heavily from the legend of Dracula, there's also his own lore that he introduces that is just fantastic. On this particular reread, I enjoyed this one so much more this time around. Having that knowledge of Dracula in my wheelhouse, I gave this one 4 stars. Now, my final book for the month of November, This Inevitable Ruin by Matt Denneman. This is book 7 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. They only had the paperback and the digital copy of this book available now. The audiobook by Jeff Hayes, Sound Booth Theater, is going to be out February 11th, 2025. I wanted to wait for the audiobook, but I just could not stand it. I needed to know what was going to happen next in this wildly addictive lit RPG series that is Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is my favorite series I have read in the year 2024. This is definitely a top 2 series for me. Again, I don't think anything's ever going to dethrone The Dark Tower, but my word, this one definitely came for that second spot like nobody's business. The premise for this particular installment of the series, the crawlers have made it to the 9th floor. This particular floor pits 10 different armies against each other in what is called the faction wars. The 10 armies fight each other to the death for control of the central castle. And the reason why I gave emphasis on death, previously in Dungeon Worlds, if you were not a crawler, you did not actually die in faction wars. This time, death is permanent. Honestly, there's really not much more I even want to share about the book description, because so much of it would be spoilers if you're not caught up on the series. And I know a lot of people are currently working through this series, so I'm not going to say anything else about it, except that this is the war that they have been fighting toward. Oh my gosh, another 5-star read. I'm 7 books in. They've all been 5 stars. I'm just completely in awe of Matt Denneman. This guy has writing chops that are just... It's amazing. I am constantly surprised with every book what he manages to build and expand, and just so many surprises and twists while keeping the humor and introducing new lore and this huge cast of characters that I'm able to easily keep up with. I love them all. It's just insane to me that he's able to carry this huge project. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I'm going, at some point it's going to get out of control. He's not going to be able to keep it going, and he does. He does. So if I've talked you into getting a head start on this one rather than continuing to wait on the audiobook, if you are a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, This Inevitable Ruin is part of that, so you can go ahead and get started on it there. Now, I have one last book that I totally forgot about for the month of November. It's Nobody's Son by Sean Stewart. This was my patron pick for the month of November. My patron Chad picked it. I DNF'd it. Oh my gosh. I got this one also through Kindle Unlimited. This one was written back in 1993. It is old school classic fantasy. It's about Mark Schilder, a commoner turned hero. He enters the haunted forest, breaks the curse of the Red Keep, and as a reward marries the king's daughter. And that's where the fairy tale supposedly unraveled. The court doesn't like him, his sword ends up getting taken, and Mark learns that happily ever after is no easy feat. Unfortunately, I didn't make it that far. So long as we were in the innermost thoughts of Mark, I had no troubles, read easily. But there was a lot of dialogue. Like in the first 20%, there was a lot of dialogue as he is traversing through this haunted forest. And I could not understand. There were so many words, I had no idea what they were. I was constantly stopping to look up and see what that word was. But I was having difficulty finding a lot of the words because there was also different dialects. And so words were shortened and all of this. And I wasn't enjoying it because it was so difficult for me to understand what they were saying, what was going on, and I didn't want to just skip the dialogue and read the other stuff. So I DNF. So that brings me to what was my favorite read of November. Y'all already know it was This Inevitable Ruin by Matt Denneman. I'm trying not to pick that series as my favorite read of every month. I really am, but it's so hard. There were so many things that Matt Denneman pulled off in this book. I just need to relax and have faith in him as an author. He keeps proving himself to me over and over again, but I'm still so surprised at what he's doing. I can't wait for book 8. Oh, I cannot wait for book 8. So that was definitely my favorite book of the month. Favorite narrator, I did not really have a standout new narrator. All the narrators that I had this month, except for Nicola Walker, are narrators that I've heard before. So I would have to say James Langton again. He just does so well with his narration of the Necroscope series. So that's where I'm going to wrap this one up. Those are all the books I read or attempted to read during the month of November. What was your favorite read of the month? Y'all will have to let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video today. I hope I helped you find some books or at least get your expectations in the right place for some of them that might be on your TBR that you haven't picked up yet. Remember, these are all my personal experiences reading this book. You could have a completely different experience yourself. So don't let me turn you off. Just maybe don't buy a book that I didn't like. Get it from your library first. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks again to all of the Nerdy Narrative patrons, but with a special shout out to the top tier nerds radiant. Chad, John, Gail, Amanda, Star, Tara, Anne, Amanda, Andrew, Kate, Ev, and Wilbur.